Perhaps Carlos Queiroz, a man of fiery temper and defensive tactics, could never fully fit in the world of elite European clubs. But by coaching Iran, the man who earned the respect of Sir Alex Ferguson himself has really come into his own as an elite coach. Queiroz and Iran did not come to Russia to sightsee and get kicked out of the group stage. With tactical organization and a ruthless competitive mindset, they wanted to overcome the odds, to defeat the best teams in the world, and to bring pride and joy to the 80 million Iranians who eagerly follow them. And today, this group of Persian lions made one of the most talented teams in the world suffer. They traded punches with Spain, pinned them against their goal. Iran can really beat anyone, and whatever happens in the final games of Group B, these players know that they can proudly lift their heads up and see eye to eye with the best. Stories like Iran are what make the World Cup so beautiful and enjoyable, and that's why we want to talk about them here in yet another episode of the Football Engineer Podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Football Engineer Podcast. I am your host, Jose, and we're going to do today another entry in the Russia World Cup audio journal, June 20th, Matchday number 7. But before doing that, I'd like to talk about the first podcast, and I'd like to thank you all who listened to the first podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your feedback. I got some good feedback, mostly just get the podcast a bit shorter and get it on time so that we can have those previews before the matches start. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. So without further ado, I think it's time for us to go analyze the matches that happened today, starting with Portugal versus Morocco. So, I'd like to say I'm surprised about this result, but no, not really. This is Portugal winning like Portugal usually does. As I talked about in yesterday's podcast, I mentioned that Morocco would probably be the more proactive team and Portugal would be the more reactive team, but I definitely didn't expect them to be this reactive. This reminds me a lot of the 2016 Euro Portugal, which they tried to defend, but they didn't even make good counterattacks. We didn't get to see that many Portugal counterattacks in this particular match compared to the Spain match. But even if Portugal's collective offensive system doesn't work, they have a Ronaldo, and Ronaldo is already 2 for 2 matches now. 2 matches in which he made his team win the match without really deserving it. It's not a match that they would have won without Ronaldo. So he's 2 for 2. He's doing what we expect of star players. So Ronaldo is doing fine, but what I'm more worried about is Portugal's defensive system. Even though Portugal spent most of the match defending, I am not sure they were defending too well. Collectively, they look weaker than they did in the 2016 Euro. They seem to be conceding more chances, and Fonte and Pepe are getting older. So they're getting slower. They're getting weaker. It's harder for them to defend everything, even though in this match against Morocco, they still stood pretty strong, but it just feels in general that Portugal's defensive system is weaker than it was before, and that could be a liability if Portugal wants to make it further into the knockout stages of the World Cup. And now I'd like to talk a bit about Morocco. Morocco, who are with 0 points in the group despite playing relatively well. I've enjoyed watching them play, but their good good games haven't really brought any results. One thing I noticed particularly about Morocco, though, is that they have good playmakers, but their style of play is a bit predictable. They depend a lot on crosses. I was looking at the stats, and they actually have around 32 crosses for the game. Look, if a team does more than 20 crosses per game, they're either really desperate or they're Bayern Munich. One of the two. So it feels like it's predictable. It feels like you already know how Morocco is going to attack, so you already know where the attacks are going to come from. Portugal already knew, okay, they're going to cross into the box, so we know what we have to defend. So it felt predictable. And actually, even though Morocco had dominated the game, I was looking at expected goal plots, and their expected goals are actually lower than Portugal. So the sum of the created chances by Portugal is higher than the sum of the created chances by the quality of the created chances by Morocco. So it means that they had more shots, more chances than Portugal, but they were not better chances. And again, that boils down to the fact that their attacking system is predictable. It also doesn't help that they genuinely don't know what to do with their center forwards. Their center forwards are Boutaib and El Kabi, and neither of them works. Today, Boutaib played for 70 minutes, then they substituted him for El Kabi, and both of them, collectively, they had just one shot in between both of them. And in a team that produces 30 plus crosses per game, that's an issue. That means that your center forward is not capitalizing on everything that you're producing. And that's a shame. That's really a shame, because I would have liked to see more of this Morocco in the tournament. I would have liked to see more Ziyech. I would love to watch more Amrabat, who is a wonderful forward who plays wherever the coach puts him. He can play forward. He can play as a right back. In general, Morocco has been very entertaining, and it's a shame to see them go. And another team that is leaving, but it won't be that much of a shame to see them go, is Saudi Arabia. So the Uruguay versus Saudi Arabia match, which Uruguay won 1-0 with a goal from Luis Suarez, went about as the way I would have expected it. As I mentioned in the preview, Uruguay decided to be the more reactive side and wait for Saudi Arabia and let Saudi Arabia take the initiative and try to create possessions. But it was a bit like letting someone just crash against the wall. Saudi Arabia just could never make it past the Uruguay wall, and the only thing Uruguay had to do was patiently wait for their talented forwards to score one of the chances, which they did. Which leads me to the discussion of what was really, now that Saudi Arabia is eliminated, what was really the best game plan for them? Because I can understand Saudi Arabia going for a possession-based style because they have a lot of talented players on the ball. But when you are more proactive, it also means that when you're facing a superior team, you're going to be more vulnerable. That's why inferior teams tend to use more defensive tactics, because they become less vulnerable that way. So I wonder if perhaps Saudi should have been a bit more of a counter-attacking team. It just feels like this was a bit naive, that a team of Saudi Arabia's quality should have been a bit more cynical, a bit more defensive. And who knows, perhaps they couldn't. Looking at the quality of their defenders, perhaps they didn't have the players required to play a more defensive style. I'm not sure, but it does leave me that impression that they were too naive in general, and their possession game also didn't, even though it adapted better to their attacking players, it didn't feel like it was too productive either. I mean, Saudi Arabia was a team that, similar to Morocco, they produce a lot of crosses per game. In this game, they produce more than 20 crosses too. And again, it's a bit predictable. You already know, Uruguay already know where the attacks are coming from. And when you have the center back partnership like Godin and Jimenez, you are not going to beat them with crosses. It's that simple. And worse when Saudi Arabia didn't really seem to have, again, goal scorer, really, really good goal scorers up front who could capitalize on the crosses that the attacking midfielders were making. And now talking about Uruguay won, and they won the match against Egypt, but it's hard not to feel a bit disappointed, because I expected Uruguay to be a different team than usual. I expected them to be willing to do more things with the ball, to do more things with possession. And that's the idea that Coach Tavares had in the first game. That's why he started as wide midfielders, De Arrascaeta and Nandes. He wanted them, those young midfielders who are good on the ball, he wanted them to play, and for Uruguay to play a more possession-based style. But in the end, the plan was quickly derailed by Egypt, and they just went to the traditional Uruguay that does counterattacks, that does direct play, long balls to Suarez and Cavani. They just went back to the usual. And in this match against Saudi Arabia, there was basically from the starting lineup an acceptance by Coach Tavares that, yeah, we're going to stick to the old plan. Instead of playing the young midfielders, on the wings, we had the veterans. We had Carlos Sanchez and Christian Rodriguez, who has in Spanish a very funny nickname, Cebolla, the Onion Rodriguez. That's weird. But yes, it seems that Uruguay is going back to the old guard, and for this tournament, it seems that we're going to get the good old Uruguay, which of course has its pros and its cons. We are certainly going to be entertained once they get to the knockout stages and fight it out against the very best. And talking about fighting against the very best, another team that can fight against the very best is Iran, who surprised us with an excellent performance against Spain. So to me, this Spain versus Iran, it was an amazing game. It is definitely among my top 3 games of the tournament. I loved it. It's two really good teams at a collective level, two opposing playing styles, possession versus counterattack, and both teams really know what they're doing. And it turned out to be a great and exciting match that actually had phases of surprisingly had more dominance from Iran towards the end of the match than what I would have ever imagined. But first, let's start reviewing what happened first in the first half. In that case, we saw a bit more like the match I expected. Basically, a very proactive Spain against a very reactive Iran. Because Spain basically was doing their possession game in Iran's half of the pitch throughout the entire first half, Iran barely got any opportunities to counterattack. But also, Spain's possession game wasn't as incisive and wide and deep as it should be to break a low block like this. Spain dominated territory, but their possession game was not good enough to generate really good shots, really good chances. And of course, Iran's defense helped a lot in that regard. Iran and Iceland are sort of sibling teams in that they both depend on low blocks, on defensive low blocks and counterattack for their strategy. In other words, both of them park the bus. Although, to be honest, I think Iran can do more things than Iceland can. For example, Iran can sometimes do good pressing whenever it's needed. So I think Iran in general is a more complete defensive unit than Iceland. And they're just a really good collective unit. Carlos Queiroz has gotten Iran to basically play like an actual football club with the same kind of cohesion and order and chemistry. And in the context of national teams where everyone has very little time to make good collective units, that ability is incredibly valuable. Their defensive low block works very well. It changes shape in the same way a club side would. They switch over to an almost 6-3-1 formation whenever they're defending in a low block. They're trying to get as many people in the box as possible, and they as well as cover the wide lanes. So they basically occupy the entire final third and try to cover all the spaces. Again, that particular aspect of Iran is very similar to Iceland. And then for the second half, things start to get more interesting. Spain saw that things weren't working out, and they did switch. They were more aggressive at the beginning of the second half. They were deeper. They had their possession gain had more width. It was quicker, and that eventually led to a good goal. Well, not a good goal. It was a bit of a lucky goal by Costa that bounced off him, but I have to say, I have to give a shout out to Costa because he's doing a great job right now as Spain's number 9. Because of the goals, he's been a bit inspired in his game. He's getting out of the box. He's linking up with the other Spanish midfielders, and he's scoring the goals. So honestly, it's the closest that I've seen to like the 2010 Villa. He's exactly the striker that Spain needed that combines both goals and good link-up play. But after Spain's goal, then we had that huge Iran reaction, in which they got that almost goal that got negated by the video assist referee. And I am still shocked, honestly, by Iran's reaction. I did not see that coming. It's the kind of competitiveness that I only expect from like tournament favorites. I expect that reaction from Germany, from Brazil, from Spain, but I did not expect it from Iran. And the fact that they have that reaction means that Carlos Queiroz has done an amazing mental job with the players too. And Iran's counter-attacking system works very well. These guys don't even move through the wings. Iran attacks right through the middle, right through the center lanes where it does the most damage. Again, this is all very well thought out, and it exposed several of Spain's issues. There are especially issues with their possession game. I would have expected in that context, after Diego Costa's goal, for Spain to control the game a bit more, to slow down the tempo. But they actually accepted to trade punches with Iran and go for the second goal. And it didn't go that well for Spain. And they suffered several counterattacks. Ideally, I am not sure I agree that much with the changes that were done. Instead of Asensio and Rodrigo, perhaps I would have preferred Thiago and Iago Aspas, who, especially Thiago, was going to accumulate more passes. He was going to slow down the tempo of the match a bit, because what Spain needed was a bit more patience and composure and slowing down the game so that Iran couldn't have that many opportunities to counter, and so that Piqué, Ramos, and Busquets didn't have to cover huge distances in every defensive transition, which was the most painful part of this for Spain. And honestly, people might criticize the performance of the back three for Spain, but I think that given the context of an almost broken Spain team at the end of that match, Piqué, Ramos, and Busquets were putting out fires there. And they did the best that they could. So it was a great match. There are so many stories, so many individual stories that are interesting. Both are good teams. It was amazing. So having said that, I'm going to go into the previews for tomorrow, for match day number 8. So tomorrow's match day number 8, June 21st, is going to start with a Denmark versus Australia. For that one, we know that Australia is a very defensive side. I would expect the Danish team to take the initiative, with the Australians defending and being the more reactive team. And because, in this case, Denmark is going to take the initiative, Eriksen is the key player. He is the key who has to make Denmark have a relatively good possession game to break down Australia's defense. Against Peru, Denmark assumed a more counter-attacking stance, and it was a bit more difficult for Eriksen to shine, but this has to be his time to shine. The next match is France versus Peru, and that will be incredibly fun, because both teams like high tempos. They like trading punches, so that's what we're going to get for a match. We're going to get high tempo, both teams attacking a lot, and creating a lot of chances. So I think we're going to have a very entertaining game here. Peru will try to do lightning quick possessions. France will try to do lightning quick counterattacks. It's going to be pretty awesome. And finally, I'd like to talk about the big bomb of tomorrow's match day, the Argentina versus Croatia, which is a huge game for Argentina. Argentina winning or losing this game could make them or break them, not only for this tournament, but for the next 10 years, because if Argentina gets eliminated in the group stage, this is gonna make Argentinian fans, media, and leadership think about a lot of things. About starting new cycles. Who knows, even if Messi would retire from the national team if this happened. So this is a very important match for Argentina's national team history. So it's going to be big, and we have to be tuned in to watch it. They can do that. Croatia can do a lot of damage. Mostly because if there's one thing that they do really well is pressing their opponents. And that's gonna make Argentina's life more difficult, because they try to play a possession game. Argentina is gonna try to be the more proactive side, but I don't think they have the midfield quality to beat a pressing system like Croatia's. So it might not turn out well for Argentina. I think there's a lot of potential for this match to go the wrong way for Argentina, but at the same time, Argentina is so unpredictable that then Messi or someone else scores 3 goals and everything changes for Argentina. So very unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen. Honestly, not even Sampaoli knew what his formation was going to be. I was listening to rumors that they were going to switch to 3 at the back, and he still hadn't decided who he wanted in the lineup. That, for example, Cristian Pavón wasn't gonna play, and that Enzo Perez would play as a starter. This is a very unpredictable match, but a very important one. So that's gonna be fun. And I guess that's it for today's audio journal entry. As always, follow me on Twitter for the mini match reviews. Follow the YouTube channel, The Football Engineer. And of course, follow me on Quora and stay tuned for any post that I make. And again, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Football Engineer podcast. And I'll talk to you later.